Welcome to Tempo Living's podcast, Tempo Talks, where we discuss home building, business, and everything in between. Today's guest is a man who's walked the whole job site, from swinging a hammer in the Hunter Valley to steering housing policy at state and local government level. He's the current Executive Director for New South Wales at the Housing Industry Association. And his job is to provide support to builders and tradies, cutting red tape, lobbying for fair rules, and making sure the next generation of apprentices, women in construction, and young entrepreneurs have a clear path into the industry. Brad Armitage, welcome to Tempo Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Let's kick things off. So, I mentioned in the intro that you're a carpenter by trade. Tell me a bit about that and your early experiences on site.
Early experiences go a long way back for me. So my old man was a painter, and this is back in the day before there was a such thing as white cards. So I was going on site as far back as I remember, and I just couldn't wait to work in construction. It was just really exciting. Even as a little fella, I used to come home and pretend to be painting at home. As the years went by, I'd go with him on school holidays and do a bit on site. But I always loved looking over at what the carpenters were doing. When the site supervisor would come to site or the builder would come to site, and I saw all that as quite exciting. And so when I got to the point of leaving school, all I wanted to do was be a carpenter at that point, with a goal of becoming a licensed builder one day. So that's what I did. I applied for a few apprenticeships, but it was around the GFC at that time, so it was really difficult to get an apprenticeship at that point in time. So I started a pre-apprenticeship at TAFE and worked for a builder as work experience for almost a year, 2 days a week, without any sort of pay for that. But I loved it. And at the end of that year, he gave me an apprenticeship, and that's how I started my career.
Fantastic. Let's talk about transitioning now into your role at the HIA, starting in 2017. Where did you start at the HIA?
When I started at HIA, I was the Assistant Director for Building and Technical Services was the name at the time. That's not air conditioners and the like, but it's building codes and standards. So I was probably one of the few carpenters that actually bothered to read the building code back in the day. But I love that. And so my role at HIA was to help members understand the code, but then also advocate and represent members when it comes to Australian standards, National Construction Code and the like.
So let's dive a bit deeper now. HIA is the peak body for residential building. It's got a national footprint as well as state divisions. For our listeners and viewers, what is the HIA and who do you represent?
The HIA is 80 years old now. It started in Victoria, actually. I don't like giving Victorians one up on New South Wales, but it did start there. It was a ragtag group of builders who got together to go in and talk to government about the issues of the day, which were material shortages after the war and skills shortages. So you kind of think, geez, not a lot changes because we've got similar issues now. But we're 80 years old this year, and we've evolved a lot over time with members' needs. And I think that you can probably describe us, well, I describe us in three different areas. The first one is that we are the leading voice when it comes to housing. So we are the expert, and that's because of our members and the feedback that we get from them. So we can talk to government, we can talk to the public, we're the leading voice. The second thing we are is the building businesses business partner. So for all building businesses, whether you're a builder, a carpenter, a supplier, or a professional service like a certifier or engineer, we've got your back and we've got the services that you need. So we've got teams that can help you with your business compliance, with your contracts, understanding the NCC where I started, or dealing with councils. We are set up for that. The third thing we are is a community. So we're a place where like-minded people come together to discuss the issues of the day. And you would know, Jeremy, that through that work, you end up with so many friends and connections and this amazing network. Some people call it a family. That's a bit cheesy for me, but it's a real network and community that we all lean on each other. So to me, that is what HIA is.
I think sometimes state government probably think we're not a family, we're a mafia with some of the wins that we've had.
Yeah, I don't think we're always best friends, but we've got good working relationships with them, and we don't always agree, but we work together for the betterment of the industry, and that's really how we pitch ourselves to government and the public as well. Like, we are the expert on housing, but we're also the problem solver. We're not here just to drop bombs. We're here to say, here's an issue, and here's how we can fix that.
What I love about the HIA though is that you mentioned family or a community, and it varies between volume home builders, sole traders, and we'll touch on this in a minute. The service committees. Me being on the planning and environment committee, it's extremely fulfilling. But what I love most about it, you mentioned solving problems, and whether it's minor or major, around the room you've got, like I said, you've got developers, you've got smaller builders, you've got custom home builders, you've got such an array, building certifiers. It's amazing the minds that are in the industry that are assisting with advocacy and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and I think that diversity across our industry is something that government actually struggles to get its head around, is just how different the various businesses are, from a small sole trader business doing bathroom renovations and the like, right up to a big project builder delivering 1,000 or more homes a year, and everything in between. We're all just as valuable. We're all building and renovating the homes that Australians need and live in. But I think the great thing about HIA is that we bring all of those together, and it's not unusual to start discussing issues in everyone's business, and you'll find these commonalities, and that really brings everyone together, and again is why we as HIA are able to be the leading voice on our industry, is because we talk to everyone no matter what they're doing.
Speaking about your advocacy work at state and local level, we'll get into this now. You spend a lot of time at Parliament House in Macquarie Street.
Yep.
What are some of the wins that you've chalked up lately? And maybe let's dive into the Getting Keys Indoors report and what outcomes we're hoping to achieve with government.
Yep. So about a week ago, we launched our report called Getting Keys Indoors. And that's really been born from years and years of our members bringing us all these bits and pieces of stuff that's getting in the way. The technical term that everyone uses is red tape. That really describes it. And the way I would describe it is like a speed bump. One speed bump on a road might not slow you down very much, but when you have a lot of speed bumps, one after the other, you know how much you're going to have to slow down to get past them, and it can even do damage. That's what we experience in the housing industry. There's just loads of issues, one after the other, that each one in their own right might not look like a huge deal, but when you add them all up, as the report outlines, it's costing industry around $165 million a year in New South Wales, and up to an extra 180 days in delays to get families into their homes. Now, that doesn't include the extra costs that people have to bear while they're paying rent and mortgage while waiting to get in their home. And just one example, which the guys from Tempo raised quite some time ago, was around driveway approvals. I mean, when you look at the system at the moment, the planning system, to go from a paddock with a cow in it to a key in a door and a family living in it, it takes about 20 years, which is too long. But within that process, we've had rezoning, we've had master planning, which you'll see where the community is. Then we have a subdivision approval, which shows where the roads are going to go. Then you go and get a house approval and you start building the house. And then at the end of all that, you also need to go and get an approval for a driveway, as if no one had thought about the fact that a driveway was coming. And at the moment, it can take longer to get the approval for the driveway than it does for the house. And I mean, in this day and age, surely we can just have one house, one approval, and speed things up. And that's what Keys Indoors is all about. And when you talk about wins, probably the broad win is just around our ability to communicate those issues with government and to get their agreement on working with us as an industry to improve those things. And that's where the Minister for Planning has been really good. He is working hard to speed up approvals. And the Department of Planning, we work really well with them. They've gone through Keys Indoors with a fine-tooth comb and have come up with a lot of things that they're going to support us on, which is great.
So 21 recommendations in the Getting Keys Indoors report. You mentioned 165 million a year to the home building industry in terms of costs. That's the cost of a new primary school, to put it into perspective. So it's pretty major.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other key highlights of that report? You mentioned driveway applications and road opening permits, and fast tracking that. But let's talk about compliant development certificate. What are the quick wins we can achieve that you've recommended to state government?
Well, one of those is looking at how complying development is applied on bushfire-prone land. So at the moment, a lot of land can be wiped out or is at risk of being wiped out of complying development if the land is mapped as bushfire prone. Now that's a real problem. Someone questioned me on whether or not it's safe to allow complying development on bushfire prone land. But the reality is we have a really robust Australian standard that says how to build on the different levels of bushfire prone land. And whether you go through a development application or a complying development certificate, you actually deliver exactly the same house. So why make mums and dads wait longer and pay more to get the same product with the same safety standards? So that's where, again, it's more of a technicality or administrative piece of red tape that slows us down as opposed to it being a safety issue. And that's what Keys Indoors is all about, is removing those layers of red tape so that we can deliver the same thing but faster.
Efficiency is key to all of this. You mentioned 20 years from rezoning to shovel-ready land. We've got builders out there who are screaming for work. They're ready on the ground. But coming back to the mums and dads, because that's effectively who we're all building for, I always say it's typically their single biggest investment that they're going to make to date. One of the recommendations, some councils are charging mum and dad, $200 to $800 just to send neighbour notification letters out. It might sound insignificant, but ultimately it's just another negative. It's a burden. So if we can really unleash and unlock the capabilities around this report, I think we're going to be in a very good position moving forward, just for the quick wins.
Yeah, totally agree with you. There's so many things like that within the planning system. An extra few $100s to send out a notification. Like, we've got electronic means to do that now. There's so many innovative ways to be able to communicate to the neighbours on what's being built. And if we put our thinking caps on, we can come up with streamlined ways of doing things, and we can remove these costs. And like I said before, again, $100 or $200 up to $800 in its own right might not sound like a lot. Or you go, that's not excessive. But when you add them all together, they're at every single point, and it does add up to a lot of extra money that a mum and dad have to pay for their house that's not necessary.
Another fix, I think, around development application approvals on unregistered land. That could save up to 10 weeks and call it $40,000 in holding costs. You still need to obtain a construction certificate following DA approval, but why can't we lodge a DA on unregistered land just to fast track that approval process and get boots on the ground, shovel-ready land developed and built once registration occurs?
Absolutely. I mean, when you look at a new subdivision that's coming, you'll see the roads are in, you'll see the lots all pegged out, they're ready to go, and then what happens in the background is that there's a lot of checks and balances that do need to happen before the land is registered. So that's fair enough. But why can't we start the process of getting the approval? So as you say, the moment the land's registered, builders can rock up, put the site fences in and start straight away. And that's going to be a huge saving for mums and dads as well.
Speaking about planning reforms, a success story that we've seen in New South Wales is Newcastle's accelerated development application pathway. Could that model scale to other local council areas? The statistic is 20% of the $1.5 billion pipeline in Newcastle in FY23 was approved in under 10 days. How do we scale it and use that as a template for all local government in New South Wales?
Yeah, Newcastle Council has had some really good outcomes. They were one of the slowest councils around, and then they had a shift in mentality. And I think that's the thing we kind of need to work on is mentality. It's mentality of the public. It's mentality of the public service. It's the mentality of local councils. And that's what we saw shift with Newcastle City Council. They came into it with a commercial mindset. How can we streamline the process? How can we speed things up? And then also reduce their workload. So they came up with this system of low impact DAs, the ones that aren't tricky, and put them into a fast track process. And that's really had some benefits for the people of Newcastle when they want to get their house built or their renovation done. It can be approved a lot quicker than what Newcastle used to do, and a lot quicker than what a lot of other councils are doing. So I think for us as an industry association and a peak body, we really need to give Newcastle a big pat on the back, highlight that and get some excitement around it, and you know, get some mayors around the state excited to actually compete with that and see the benefits that can be for their local community if they have that same commercial mindset to their operations.
Not to use such damaging terminology, but you know, every time you turn the TV on, the news talks about New South Wales housing crisis. The target the government has is 377,000 dwellings in the next 5 years. Are we going to achieve that?
Look, the target is the government's target. How many homes do we need to build? I think if you speak to our members, the two things we need is housing affordability. So we need enough homes to meet demand. We also need to deliver enough homes that will keep our industry at a steady pace, something that we can all build at a good level. And I mean, it would be an ideal world, but be able to take the boom bust cycle out of it, which makes it really difficult for businesses to plan. But when it comes to that number of 377,000 in the next 5 years, I think that's a bit of a pie in the sky target. We're not likely to meet it. And that isn't a blight on any particular government. I'm not pointing the finger at Chris Minns here in saying that, or any particular council. The situation that we're in the moment is because of 20 years of undersupply compared with the demand that we've got in Sydney. And so while we are in a crisis right now, we're in a once-in-a-generation crisis that needs a once-in-a-generation response. But what we also need to do is to start planning 10, 20, 30 years ahead. Where is the metro going to go in the future? Where are people going to be living, so that we can actually plan, and then in 20 years' time, we're not in another situation where we are right now.
We're talking about supply. Once that land is shovel ready, we've got to build it. There's a shortage of trades, skilled trades in New South Wales and Australia as a whole. Let's talk about HIA apprentices. How crucial is it? You know, we're talking about freeing up land, getting it ready, but then, as I said, we need to be able to build them. The apprenticeship program with HIA, I think, is a wonderful initiative. I was actually a HIA apprentice, so shout out to Gary Rudnick and the HIA apprentices team. I had an amazing experience over those 4 years. What are some of the things that HIA are doing with their apprentice program, and how can we encourage more school leavers, not just with HIA apprentices, but overall in the industry, to take up a trade and pursue a career in construction?
In HIA, we have around 900 apprentices nationwide. They're in what's called a group training scheme. So the apprentices are employed by us, and then we place them with different builders, which would have been your experience. The reason that that's such a good program is twofold. First off, for the apprentice, you get a bit more certainty that you're going to get exposure to all of the things you need to do to become a well-rounded apprentice by the end of it, because if you're with a host that's only doing frames, for example, you can eventually be moved to another host who could be doing fix outs or fit offs or other things to make sure that you get exposed to everything throughout the apprenticeship. You also get extra care. So our field officers are out there looking after our apprentices all the time, helping them solve their day-to-day issues and encouraging them to make sure they've got their lunch packed, that they're getting enough sleep and all of that stuff that you need to learn as an apprentice. It's how life skills come from an apprenticeship, that serve you for the rest of your career. And I found that, and I'm sure you did too. But on the host side of things, the benefit of putting on a HIA apprentice is that there's less risk to your business, because when you direct indenture an apprentice, you've got to have 4 years worth of work for them. And we know at the moment with the boom bust cycle, you don't know what work you might have in 6 months' time. And that's where with HIA apprentices, if you do run out of work or things slow down, we are in a position to take them back and place them with another host. You also have less administrative work to handle, because we invoice our hosts at the end of the week, and you pay it like you do with any other supplier. So you don't have to worry about payroll tax, super, reporting to long service leave, all those extra things that take up your time. We handle that for the business. So it's a really good program. The thing that I love is, like you mentioned Gary Rudnick, our apprentice team love looking after our apprentices and seeing them complete. And there's a lot of pride that comes with that program. And I think that's a really cool thing. We're also in a position to access government funding when it's there. So over the years, we've been able to run programs like we did with Homes New South Wales, which actually helped disadvantaged youths get an apprenticeship that they might not have been able to get without that funding. And we've had around about 100 completions to date, which is something that's really positive. And it's all well and good for us to say that we don't have enough skills, but we need to, do what we speak about. And that's where HIA Apprentices does that. That's an extra 100 apprentices that we've been able to get qualified and into our market.
I attended the Apprentice Awards New South Wales last year, and the candidates who weren't successful in obtaining one of these awards, I was blown away. The skill, the passion, their commitment, both from their host trainers, the HIA, but seeing these young men and women take up the industry, on a personal note, like you mentioned, the really the highlighting factor for me with HIA apprentices is the fact that you can go from host to host to build your skill set up. I started with a custom home builder. To be honest, for the first 6 months, I didn't touch a power tool. It was trench digging, all the hard stuff, the baptism of fire, trench digging, mixing cement, loading up bricks on the scaffold. But you're engaging with really great people, whether it is the bricklayer, whether it is the concreter, the steel fixer, and you're getting a wide range of skills, albeit it is hard work, but it's fulfilling work because you can see the progress. Then I moved to a top floor addition specialist builder, actually Matthew Earl from Rossmark Building Designers in the Sutherland Shire. He was a host trainer of the year. Wonderful business, really great guy, great team. So having that experience building top floor additions, and then some other carpentry work, I was laying timber flooring, and then entered the project home world. The opportunity there, again, across one industry, but so many different specialties is amazing. And then talking about getting you ready for post-apprenticeship, subcontracting your own business, the timesheet that had to be filled out, and that was back when I had to send a fax through to HIA.
Faxes.
The old timesheet, it starts to get you regimented, tax time. What does that look like? The guidance that you're getting from your host trainer as well as the HIA really sets you up for success long term.
Absolutely. And that's what I loved about the apprenticeship too. At the time, it felt like really hard work. Like I was up working for a custom builder in the Hunter, And there's some really cold days up there in the Hunter doing custom builds in the Dungog area and around Patterson. And I still remember in the winter where you'd get your tape measure out and it's frozen shut and you can barely feel your fingers and you think, what am I doing? But that's life skills. I mean, it teaches you resilience. You learn to get into a routine and turn up every day. And I mean, you made the comment about, not touching a power tool in the first 6 months. Yeah, that's right. You're moving things around, you're digging holes, you're helping the trades get their materials ready. And the harder you work, the more exposed you get to things and you start to learn and be trusted to do a bit more over time. But at the end of the day, it's not really any different to any other career, is it? If someone wants to be a doctor, how many years of learning and reading books do you have to do before you actually do anything that's like being a doctor? And it's the same with us. It's hard work, but you're outside. There's some amazing days. We have warm winters in Australia, so there's no better country to do it in. And I think you made the comment earlier, how do we attract people into the trades? And I think one of the things that we need to do better as an industry is get people like yourself in front of young people. You're a general manager of a well-respected project builder and you started as a apprentice carpenter. And it just shows that an apprenticeship really does open so many doors for a career in the housing industry. You could at the end of your apprenticeship, you're a ready-made entrepreneur. You can start a business. You can make that business as big as you want. You want to become a multimillionaire? You can do that. If you want a small business that enables you to work 3 days a week and surf 2 days a week, you can do that. If you want to move into the corporate world and run big businesses and have the thrill that comes with that too, you can do that. It opens so many doors, and that's why I get so excited about apprenticeships.
I think having that experience too, let me tell you now, in 2008, 2009, if someone told me that I'd be the general manager of a home building company and interviewing the executive director of New South Wales for the Housing Industry Association on a podcast, I'd tell them they're completely mad. Having that experience, and like you said, it's a wonderful pathway, a wonderful career and industry, but keeping an open mind as well about your opportunities, I think is crucial, especially for the younger generation coming through. I heard on the radio yesterday, actually, some of the fallbacks and the negatives around an apprenticeship is the pay. But, if you're at uni, you're going to have a HECS debt, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 if you've got a master's. You're probably working retail or in hospitality. By the end of that degree, you've got a huge debt and you're effectively starting out, and you're 4 years out of school, could be 5 or 6. With a trade, you can start it early. You can start it when you finish your HSC. But by the time you've got that credential, you're earning tradesman wages. And like you said, it can be very lucrative.
Absolutely. I say this all the time. At the end of your apprenticeship, not only do you have no HECS debt, you're actually in a position to be earning more than the average tertiary qualified individual. So the end of the 4 years, you're in a better position than a university graduate. So why wouldn't you consider it? It just works out mathematically.
And I applaud the HIA for really being a huge advocate for apprentices, their apprenticeship program, but also the community work they do. What can we do from a community outside of the Housing Industry Association? So, the private schools, the public schools, mums and dads, what can we do to encourage people taking up a trade?
The thing that we've found with the work that we do is that the biggest influencer on a young person's decision about what career they choose is their parents. And so I think for us, like I said, we need to get people like yourself in front of young people. We also need to get people like yourself in front of the parents who are influencing their children about where to go. And I think that there's a lack of knowledge around just how great a career in the housing industry is. I think historically even today, there's a bit of a negative perception around a career in the housing industry or starting an apprenticeship. It's sort of seen as a backup if you're not smart enough. But I can say from my own experience in the role I'm in, some of the most successful, intelligent business people that I've met over my 8 years with HIA started out as trades, and they're some of the most respected people in our industry. And so I think we need to sort of change the messaging on that and get that in front of parents and just show them how great it is.
And this is both for men and women. And speaking more specifically now on women in construction, again, the HIA do a wonderful job at advocacy around that. I attended the HIA Women's event only a couple of weeks ago, emceed by Kathy Inglis, another amazing mind in our industry. The statistic is, I think it's 2.7 New South Wales trade card holders make up women. The goal by 2030 is 6%. What can we do to advocate more? One, to support women in construction, but really promote that. We talk about supply chain shortages and trade shortages. There is a massive pool out there of women who are capable. That's a quick win, I think, for us, albeit it is a long-term strategy, but really encouraging that part of the workforce to take up a trade and really breaking down the stigma of women in construction and supporting it and growing it.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a bit of a cliche, but you've heard the expression, you can't be what you can't see. And we do have some really good, outstanding examples of women in construction, and the role of the Building Women program, which HIA runs, is about shining a light on those people and providing that inspiration so that younger women can see that example of who they can be. You mentioned Kathy Inglis. You look at her CV. She's a bit of a mentor to myself, and I learnt a lot from her over the years. But you look at her CV, and her career has just been incredible. And we need to get more people like Kathy in front of our younger generation so that they can see the opportunities that are available to people in the industry. Another one, Bethany Masika from Blue Eco Homes, decided to have a career change. Bethany's a qualified carpenter, has won Australian Apprentice of the Year, and does an amazing job in advocating to young women how great a career in construction is. And so I think that the industry is perfect for anyone who wants to join. We just need to shine a light on that. At times, the culture of construction is questioned, and we've made a lot of progress over the years, and I think there's probably never been a better time than now to join our industry. So it's about communication, I think.
In our business, we have a lot of women in the office working with us, our drafting manager, our operations manager, customer relations manager, and they do a wonderful job. I think our industry is definitely ready for that sort of skill and that skill set coming out into the site, whether it is trades, whether it's supervision. To be honest, I think they're more organised. They've got good attention to detail, good time management skills. And, speaking personally, our operations manager holds me to task, and which is fantastic because we need to get things done. I think there's no better, people out there to consider then transitioning to site, or even in the early days, taking up a trade.
Yeah, in 2015, 2016, I was actually in Perth in Western Australia, and I was running a small registered training organisation, the construction arm of that. I was the trainer and assessor there, and we were training like teams of apprentices that were in that group training organisation as well. And each of the sort of 4 classes I was looking at had one young woman in each of the classes, and for every one of them, they were the best student out of all of them. And whenever you did a group sort of exercise, I still remember this one young woman. She was a gun, and just watching the way she would operate, she made the team members around her better with the way that she instructed them. She explained to them things that they didn't understand. She would set out quicker than any of them. And I just think that, it doesn't matter what gender you are. if you're skilled, you can be a gun in our industry. So why not?
Absolutely. You mentioned mentoring, Kathy Inglis being a bit of a mentor for you. How important is it, even at the early stages of your career, host trainers, for example, and then business leaders as you transition into a career, how important is it to have a mentor? And give me some insights as to who's been your biggest mentor getting you where you are today.
Yeah, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for mentors or people supporting me or people that I've learnt from over the years. And that goes back to during my apprenticeship, where the tradesman on site would sort of take you aside and give you little tips and help you out along the way. And then moving into more corporate roles as well. Obviously, I worked with David Bear for close to 8 years. So he was a real mentor for me, in both my personal life and in a professional capacity as well. But I mean, the list would be too long if I went through everyone. The thing I've learnt over the years is that you just have to be open to learning from everyone. And even the people you come across in your career that you might not like very much, or you might not like their style, there's still something you can learn from that person. And I think it's about changing your mindset about what am I achieving or what am I doing to what can I learn from this people. And that's where in my current role, people like Laurie Constantino and Martin Appap, a couple of well-respected industry people that whenever I call them or in a bit of situation that I haven't experienced before, they usually have been through that and have got some really good tips on how to navigate that. And it becomes invaluable in your career. So you really need to rely on others and respect that.
Yeah, our Tempo Living's two directors, you mentioned Martin Appap and Michael Gramo, both sit on the executive rec committee for the HIA. Amazing business minds, and working with them over the last 6.5, 7 years, I would say it's worth 2 uni degrees just by sitting next to them, absorbing and getting their experience. And they've been in the industry for about 40 years. Is invaluable. So I think that mentoring piece is so crucial for development of school leavers, for people just starting out in their careers. It's wonderful that you've had a similar experience. Moving now to HIA service committees, they do a wonderful job in their advocacy that then filters up to the likes of yourself to then lobby state government. Talk to me a bit about HIA service committees.
Yeah, so earlier we mentioned what HIA is, and it's 3 different pillars, one of them being the leading voice on the housing industry, and that all comes from our members. But our strength in our advocacy and our membership is the committee structure that we have at HIA. So that's a group of volunteer members who will come in and discuss the issues of the day, discuss what's hampering their business, what's contributing to construction costs increasing and making housing affordability worse. We discuss those things, we come to agreement on those things, and then those topics work their way up through our committee structure. So we have committees that look at the planning and environment issues, which I know is the one that you are represented on. We also have the technical committee, which is like building codes and standards. We have a training and professional development committee as well, which looks at skills and the next generation and how to sort of elevate our industry with its training needs. We have a kitchen and bathroom committee, and we also have a legal and compliance committee. We have some regional based committees as well, so Wollongong and the South Coast, and then up in Coffs Harbour as well. Now, when all those committees meet together, the issues are then filtered up to the regional executive committee. So the chair of each of the service committees will sit on the regional executive committee. Those things get elevated to a point that it then goes up to another level to what's called National Policy Congress. And that's where around the country, all of the issues that our members are facing nationwide get voted on and are formed enshrined in HIA policy I would say, and position statements. That all sounds very technical, but what it means is that our members set the direction of HIA's lobbying. An example is that's why housing affordability is really the king when it comes to HIA's position and our advocacy efforts, because that's what our members want to be front and centre.
For someone considering taking up a committee role, what are the benefits you think that they'd get out of it? To me, I look forward to the bi-monthly meetings. There's a lot of great minds around the table, so it's a good education piece, but also you're contributing to changing policy, lobbying, and setting that framework, like you're saying, for the higher up committees within the HIA. But what's your take on it?
Yeah, it's really valuable. So speaking to a few of my members that are on committees, people like yourself, one thing that really resonates with all of them is how proud they are of being able to give back to the industry. So it's an opportunity to make change. And so you're contributing to something bigger than just yourself, but that also has benefits to your business as well, because the things that could be hampering your business end up on the table there, and then that becomes part of HIA's lobbying activities. So there's business benefits. But then there's personal benefits as well, because around the table is a range of like-minded people within our industry, and you build this incredibly strong network of friends and people in your industry that you can draw on. And over the years, I've seen so many committee members just become really close friends. And then when you go to HIA events, you see them catching up again, and people are genuinely excited for the committee meetings when they come around to discuss these issues, and we'll usually have a list of items that they want to raise, things that have gone on in their business, and the end of the meeting, people don't want to leave. They end up hanging around for ages, and I can't lock up the office afterwards. So, but that's a testament to the vibe that there is in that environment.
Yeah, I think I'm probably guilty of holding people
back.
Yeah,
you've kept me back a few times, yeah.
I think it's wonderful too, just coming back to the industry as a whole, it's quite tribal, but what's amazing about it is, you've got your competitors in the room, like you're saying, at a HIA event. Everyone's so friendly. We've all worked together in some capacity, especially from a committee perspective. I think that really highlights what HIA is, which is, they are a community, and the advocacy work and everything else that you guys do, you set the foundations of a really, really fantastic operation. And it is wonderful to see, different builders shaking hands, and you'd think they're competitors, but ultimately there's enough work for everyone to go around. And it's just a really great aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really exciting shift that I've noticed, and I'm not sure if you've noticed it as well, but when I first started my apprenticeship, I think the vibe was a bit different, and you'd see sort of the older builders, even though they'd meet to talk, they'd never talk business. Like, there's just this, I'm not letting them in on my secrets or how I do things. There's just this bit of, it was a bit colder back then. But I think this next generation of builders coming through, the environment is just totally different, where everybody is there to support each other when it comes to business ideas, sharing of how to get through different situations, but then also on a personal level, looking out for each other. The amount of concern there is, we were talking about it before we started here, the rates of mental health issues and suicide in our industry are incredibly bad, and we need to do better at that. And the HIA Charitable Foundation does have a partnership with Beyond Blue that specifically works towards getting more information that's suitable for tradies and people in our industry. But that's where this sort of community mindedness comes to the fore as well. I've seen instances where one of our builders or members might be struggling mentally. It's a challenge for them to reach out, but when they do reach out, there's just so many people ready to look after each other, and I think that's the best thing about our community that we've got.
I think that's a very, very important topic and conversation around mental health. Yeah. You mentioned highest rate of suicide, drug, alcohol abuse. Yeah, it's real. And I think through the HIA Charitable Foundation, in partnership with Beyond Blue, it's so important, as important than ever, I think, to speak up, but not only to speak up, to check in. Check in with your mates. Are you okay day is one day in September, but it should be a constant discussion and front of mind. Tell me a bit about the HIA Charitable Foundation.
So the Charitable Foundation is our sort of organisation that enables us to give money where it's needed most. Over the years, we've given over $1.1 million to Beyond Blue, which is really exciting. But we've also donated to the Victorian Homeless Fund. We've provided money in the past towards asbestos research, and more recently towards silicosis research. So it's a way for the housing industry to give back to where it matters. As you mentioned, mental health is a really big issue. Suicide rates we are overrepresented as an industry when it comes to that. And that's probably largely due to the fact that it's a male-dominated industry at the moment. And we aren't good at talking about our feelings. It's just something that we're not good at. We'll talk about a lawnmower. We'll talk about the footy. But when it comes to how are you doing, that's a challenge. And I think that's the thing that I'm noticing change, though, with attitudes in our industry compared to when I started my apprenticeship to now. When I catch up with one of my builder members who's like a friend, it's not unusual now for the first thing they ask to be, how are you? How are you doing? Or are you okay? And it could be something along the lines of, I've noticed how busy you are lately, you've got a lot going on, are you a bit stressed? And I think that's great because we're getting better as a community at looking out for each other and not having a stigma around the fact that at times, including myself, you have down days and we all struggle with mental health at times. But being able to open up to people and just support each other is really important.
You mentioned the word busy, and I read an article the other day where when someone says I've been really busy, that should be not a red flag, but a light bulb moment to dive a little bit deeper into what that actually means. Because I think for males, that's their way of saying, I'm on the rev limiter here. But asking that question, that follow-up, especially in our industry, there's a lot going on. And being that support your mate, and are you okay is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I were just chatting about this before we started the podcast. And it's something I've noticed that as my career's gone on and my positions have sort of gone up as far as responsibility goes, it's easier to find yourself not looking after yourself as much as what you used to because you are so busy. And again, when you talk to a friend, you might just say you're busy, but what you really mean internally is that I'm struggling to do things that I need to do for myself and look after myself, eat properly, go to the gym and all of that. And so I think it's really important to have a network of professionals who have been through what you've been through successfully and really lean on them for tips and tricks.
I said my excuse is the camera actually adds kilos to your waistline, so I'm running with that at the moment.
I'm glad to hear because mine's been going up too.
Well, Brad, I really appreciate your time today. We've covered off a lot. I don't envy your position at the HIA, but congratulations on the work that you've done and achieved so far. I wish you all the best. I'll see you at the next committee meeting and appreciate your time coming on Tempo Talks today.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
And that's it for episode 3 of Tempo Talks. Big thanks to Brad for cutting through the noise and giving us the real story on housing, red tape, and the future of our industry. If you got value out of today's chat, hit follow on your podcast app or YouTube and share it with your network. For more resources, head to the HIA website, hia.com.au, and look out for Brad's Getting Keys Indoors report. I'm Jeremy Whiting, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Tempo Talks.